Hello everybody, this is week 3 of our MOOC and we're delighted to be back here with you again. We're going to cover a few of the points raised during week 3 and just put a few extra ideas into the mix for you to react to. All right, over to you, Rob. What's your what's the first thing you'd like to say in response to what's been happening this week?
Well, the first thing that I thought about was how much I've been influenced personally by the pandemic and learning how to teach. So we're just going back to teaching face to face and sometimes blended. But I realized how many of my activities that I engage in class, what I ask students to do and how I ask them to do it has been influenced by teaching online for a couple of years. And I wanted to invite people to maybe comment on this step or revisit some of the steps from this week and just give the insight into how they think, using technology or things that they've learned during the COVID pandemic has influenced things like how they deal with language, how they deal with language complexity, how they present things to students. So lots of the themes from this week. Very simple question, really. How has the pandemic affected what you and what have you learned from that you can take forward?
That makes me think that one of the issues that we talked about in this week is managing large classes, and a lot of you have very, very large classes to work with. So during the pandemic, therefore, presumably you tried making recordings of your lectures, has this then impacted on your confidence? For example, are you now more confident about making recordings of your lectures, how you come across, how you speak, how you chunk, into sections and so on. And also, as a result of that, do you perhaps release recordings before a lecture, before an event, so that students could watch some of the content of your lecture before they come to class, therefore allowing you to do different activities in the time allotted to you for your lecture? So I'm just wondering if we could be witnessing some very beneficial knock-on effects from the pandemic in the way that we use technology and therefore how we structure our classes. What do you think, Rob?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what I was thinking while you were talking. I was thinking how many options there are now. We were discussing some good examples with the slide share example task, where we're looking at, okay, what makes a good PowerPoint presentation for an EMI audience, which of course depends to some extent. But then there's the question, when do they receive the PowerPoint? What are they doing with the PowerPoint? Is the PowerPoint delivered by you? And then is the PowerPoint delivered by you in a recording before they come to you? Or are you delivering it live to them? There are just so many options for how people might engage with visual information and ideas and your voice, which can be synchronous or asynchronous, and which are the words you have to use now, otherwise people don't take you seriously anymore.
Yes.
You have to talk about asynchronous and synchronous. But no, I think it's a really interesting point that the range of choices we have in education now are much broader, and we need to talk about these and decide when to employ which strategies and how. So
I think, as we mentioned last week, we've been doing this for a few years now, and we have noticed how things have changed. And one of the things now is, I think, coming through the section when we talk about using presentation slides. In the beginning, I recall people reacting to those pieces of advice that we would give as being quite new and fresh and so on. Whereas now people know a lot of the tips that we talk about, and they're not so impressed by the technology. You know, it's not technology for technology's sake, but thinking about the learner, which should always be the center of our focus, thinking about the learner and how best we can help the learner to arrive at those goals and objectives that we've set for ourselves. So we have the learner in mind, and we're therefore in a position to look more objectively at the technology and reject the types of technology that don't quite serve our purposes. So here we now have a plethora of activities and ways of engaging with our audience. And we have all of the technologies as well. So there is a lot, as you were saying, a lot to choose from, and making sure that we're making the right decisions is what lies at the heart of success, and success is what we're aiming for, isn't it?
Yeah, I think and just one final point I'd add there, because I think this is a really interesting area of discussion, and it's really relevant now. So I'd invite people to comment on their experiences and their views of this. But I think one of the things that really interests me is that we both went to a talk a few weeks ago, and that interested me a lot, talking about research on learning and how sometimes we want the language to be clear. I think that's a key point of this week. We want the message to be clear. We want the language to be clear. We don't want a barrier for students in an EMI environment that's unnecessary. But it's really interesting that when students perceive this kind of slick, easily consumable presentation of information, they sometimes think that it's easy. So they don't work so hard. Their brain doesn't engage as much. So if you think about how we encourage students to learn, it's often through challenge. It's through getting them to think, getting them to engage, getting them to question. And sometimes if you deliver things too neatly, then students think, oh, I understood everything, it's easy. And then they don't actually retain or develop what we want them to develop. So I think this is another big question of education, is you can slip into technology and deliver things that are very neat and very clear, but are the students learning from them? I think that's another important area.
It's a very important area, and it demands a much longer conversation and discussion than we can have now.
We encourage comments, of course.
Of course. I think this is where language really is important. We tend to think about language as the words that I choose when I'm delivering my content, whereas in fact, I think I would flip the coin now, that most importantly, given everything we've said today and this model, I hesitate to call it a model because I don't want people to think that there's a set way of doing things, but this idea, this concept that there may be very many different activities going on before a session, during a session, and after a session. This is the language, it's the meta language that is more important than the language of the content. And by this, I'm thinking of instructions, giving instructions. We always say rather glibly, oh yes, your instructions have got to be clear. But when there's a lot going on and you've got perhaps a big audience, and it might be online, it might be in the physical classroom, it might be a hybrid, whatever it is, those instructions really have to be crystal clear. So it's not enough to just verbalize them. I feel they have to be supported by a written text. So students can hear what you're saying, and they can also read either on the screen or on a handout, just to make it clear. And even then there will be probably, knowing students, and I was one once myself a long time ago, there will be somebody who doesn't follow the instructions carefully. But instructional language is now really coming coming to the fore with this sort of patchwork of different activities and type ways of engagement that can come together. So yeah, I think that's my final thought anyway.
Yes, yeah, no, I like that idea, and I think it's something with student-centered learning. We often talk about focusing on what the students are learning, but if the teacher's stepping back, the student needs to know what to do. I think, yes. So absolutely, I agree.
To be empowered.
Indeed, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So we've given so much for people to comment on. I think we should probably end there and let them comment.
We should. Yes. Yes. So have a good week, everybody, and we'll see you in a week's time. All right. Do put your comments in the step for the tutor review of week 4. I can't remember the number, but you know where it is now.
Yes. We'll answer any questions you have there. So yeah, it'd be good to hear if you have any questions. That'd be great. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everybody.
Nice to talk to you, Mary.
Bye for now.
Okay. Bye-bye.